Hello favorites, are you tired of buying cakes? Do you wonder how those sumptuous cakes are made? Then follow me, I'll show you how. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you if you just bumped into us. Thank you for staying put to watch this video. Today we are making a basic cake. Basic cake is like your regular vanilla cake or your regular queen's cake. We call it basic cake because this is the first idea you need to have as a baker or somebody that makes cake. From there you can start making other types of cake, but these are the basics that you need to know. Now, one of the major considerations in making a very nice cake is the butter. The choice of the butter is very important because the butter you use gives a greater percentage of the taste you have in the cake. Your choice of butter determines to a large extent the aroma. 4 major ingredients you're going to be needing, which is your butter, sugar, flour, and egg. And their ratio is almost like 1:1:1:1. So to get a very nice cake, you need to be very careful about the ratio of these 4 ingredients that I have mentioned. So we start by measuring out the butter. Choose a bowl that will make you comfortable to work. I chose this bowl because it keeps my contents in one position, not scattered all over the bowl and making you fight with it. And then you either use a mixer, a hand mixer, I say the mixer, commercial mixer, hand mixer, or even a wooden stick when you don't have any of these that I've mentioned. This is for beginners, those who might be wanting to go into the act of cake making, those who might just want to start a business in cake or start doing good cakes. Maybe you have been doing cakes before now. So for these tutorials today, I'm doing 2 portions. I should have started you on 1 portion, but I'm going to do 2 portions because I need more of the cakes for what I want to use it for. So I decided to put a little more of the quantity. So a portion is 250 grams. I'm going to be putting the measurements in the comment section or write them out on this video. So do well to check it out because your measurement determines to a large extent the outcome texture of your cake. Now remember I said we measure the butter first. Why we measure first the butter? Because when you determine the quantity of your butter, it will now tell you the quantity of sugar, egg, and flour to use for it. Then the next thing to measure is the sugar. You can use any brand of sugar. Depends on what is readily available to you. Then after measuring these 2 things, put them together in the bowl. So for the 500 grams of butter that I'm doing today, I'm using around 350 grams of sugar. But the choice of the quantity of sugar depends on some factors. Number 1 is the age of the person eating the cake, their lifestyle, their taste. Lifestyle means how the person exhausts energy daily, how the type of work they do, the type of life they live, how they carry on with daily activities. If the person is very active and burns a lot of energy, you might not need to worry about the quantity of sugar. If they are also not having some health conditions, you might also not worry about the quantity of sugar. Their taste is another consideration. So it's good to know the taste, health condition, as well as lifestyle of the person eating the cake. It will help you decide the sugar. In as much as you're also determining these things, there are some things you can't do. You cannot go above the quantity of the butter you are using for that cake. So it's either you stick to the exact measurement of your butter or you go a little below it. But there is a limit if you want to make cake and not some other product. So like I said, one portion is 250 grams, and if you're going to do exactly one portion, you're going to do between 150 to 250 grams of sugar. So stay within that limit. If you want it to be really sweet, especially when it is children, you might need to stay exactly butter to sugar ratio. So, but if you're doing for adults, you might need to tone it down because they don't usually like very sweet things. So we start off with creaming our butter. Creaming is done when you would have put the sugar and the butter together and you start the process of creaming. Creaming is to blend the sugar and the butter together such that they become white, fluffy, soft, and very well aerated. So you might not have a hand mixer, you might not have a commercial mixer, you have a wooden stick. It means you're going to get a nice bowl. Sit where you have a proper grip of the bowl so you can beat the butter and the sugar to the point where they are white enough to start incorporating other ingredients. Watch what I am doing. I start creaming the butter with the mixer and then beat it. You keep doing that. You keep doing that. It's advisable to have a commercial mixer. It's easier because you can work without bothering to hold the bowl and the mixer. They can stand on their own while you're working. It helps you do other things in the process. But I'm using hand mixer here because I want you to see the possibility of also using that. If you want to drop the hand mixer, be very careful. The weight can drop your bowl. You cream the cake, keep stirring, keep doing. At first you start at a very minimum speed like 1 or 2. As you do that, watch what I'm doing at this point. This is not the point to put the egg because I have not properly creamed my butter. But you discover that when you start this process, if you've been baking, you will know that you might be fighting with getting everything together. At this point, I had to add just 1 egg. It helps the butter obey or respond. So the egg helps everything come together and even help me achieve the process of the creaming faster. Take note, I have used 1 egg here. When we come to using egg, I will remind you that I've already put 1 egg. So I like doing this because it helps me achieve the purpose faster, because egg is slimy, slippery, helps dissolve the sugar, it helps make the butter come together in one place. You will see it when I scrape the bowl. You will discover that there's a difference. There's a difference. So you might need to do this if you're finding it difficult to get your butter respond to creaming or your sugar respond to creaming. Notice what I'm doing. I'm trying to work the butter all over until it gives me that whitish look, that creamy white look. And then while you do that, try to scrape. You need to have a scraper. Try to scrape all the contents together to be in the center of the bowl. It helps your mixer work better. When everything is scattered all over the bowl, the mixer, your wooden stick or the commercial mixer might not have a grip of the contents of the bowl. You notice the change in the butter. It's no longer as lumpy as it was as at the time we started. Remember, I said you might need a little bit of patience to go through every stage. I'm not just doing this video just to make a video to get views. I want to teach you how you can become a pro in making your cake. I don't have anything censored. I'm showing you from start to finish. At this point, when it's beginning to get white, you can increase the speed of your mixer. When you increase the speed, it's faster. I think I just moved to speed 3. So the next ingredient you're going to use is the egg. For one portion, you might need 4 pieces of large egg or 5 pieces of medium egg. I'm using 5 in this case because the eggs are not that big. So that's for one portion. Remember, I am doing 2 portions, which is 500 grams. So I'm using 10 pieces of eggs. Remember too that I've added 2 while I was trying to cream my butter, so that gets very fluffy. So I'm using the remaining. I put in consideration the fact that I've used part of the egg before now. It's not compulsory that you would do what I did with the egg at first, but in case you didn't do that, so you're starting with 8 to 10 eggs here. Now you break them into a different bowl. Not that you can't put them directly in the butter that you've just creamed, but to be on a safer side for eggshells and deads, as well as for those who are beginners. For people who have been baking, it's not a big deal. They know what to do. You can put them directly and continue your mixing. But for someone who is just starting this whole thing, it's advisable you break it into your bowl. Take note of how I am also putting my eggshells together. There are times you have a very large quantity of cake to bake that will require up to 30-40 eggs, and you can't keep breaking them one after the other and throwing in the dustbin. You're going to fill up everywhere. You can tuck them in together. Even 40 pieces, you can keep tucking them in and make a small quantity of the eggshells for your dustbin. So at this point, we are going to whisk the egg. If you're using a commercial mixer, there is this hook that is like egg beater. The hand mixer doesn't have it, so I'm going to use the hand mixer like that. But if you have the other type of standing mixer or commercial mixer, it comes with 3 hooks: the dough hook, the one for the egg, and the one that looks like this one that I'm using now. So 3 of them have their different function. We're going to use the one for the eggs if you are doing eggs, but not like you can't use any other thing. I'm using a different thing now. The same one I'm using for beating the butter, I'm still using it because that's what I have at the moment. And then you can also use your spoons to do that. After that, you put your flavorings. In this case, we're using vanilla and milk. Some people just go ahead to put everything together in the general mixture, but I will advise you do liquid to liquid, all liquid content to liquid to the eggs when you're mixing them. So for this, we just take a cup of the vanilla essence, we take a cup of the milk essence. There are different shades of milk in the market. You can get the ones you prefer. If you feel like blending some other flavors together, you can also do that. For me, I like to play with the flavors, but for the purpose of this lesson, let's leave it at vanilla and milk. Don't do much of it. Now, it is important to get very nice flavors in the market, the food grade, not just anything you see. If you have access to the very natural ones, I got in contact with a vanilla stock, a natural vanilla plant, and it's amazing. As each day goes, the vanilla gets into the food. So, but if you don't have access to those, you can always get them in the market. So we mix the liquids together, and the next thing we're going to do is to put them in the butter that we have just creamed. Make sure your egg is well beaten, that is almost foaming. You will get a better effect when you use the egg beater. Now at this stage, we are incorporating the egg into the creamed butter bit by bit. Now I will say bit by bit because it's important for you not to allow this whole thing curdle. When I mean cuddle, you notice that they are forming lumps, like they are not homogeneous enough, like it's breaking, like it's cutting. So it's not advisable to have that. That is when you might start having cakes that are stiff. I don't know what word to use for it, but it's advisable to go gradually as you're beating your mixture in a maximum speed of like 3, so that the egg mixes properly with the butter and the sugar in a very homogeneous form. Look at it. It's not curdling. You have something creamy, something homogeneous, something that is not curdled. At this point, I keep working my mixture together so that they don't all get lost in the bowl, so that they are properly mixed. Your scraper or your spatula is your friend at this point. If you are mixing cake and you don't have a spatula, there are many brands in the market. You might be struggling. Spoon cannot give you exactly what you want. These are basic tools you need as a baker. So you keep going until you have a very homogeneous mixture. And remember, you cannot use the same speed you used in the beginning when you were beginning to cream your butter, because you had put liquid. Now you need a speed that will bring everything properly together. At this point, I'm using speed level between 3 and 5. You see the speed levels on your mixer. You need a scale when you are doing this. I think the hand scale is very cheap and handy. It should be your companion when you are mixing a cake. The next thing we're going to do is to measure the flour. There are many ways to do it. It's either you measure everything down and keep them, so you'll be taking them one after the other. But the reason I didn't do that is to be showing you exactly what I am doing, stage by stage. At this point, I am measuring the flour. Remember, you cannot just put your flour lumpy like that with all the debts and the lumps in them. You need a sieve of a very good aperture. I'm not talking about the sieve you use for rice. Look at the type of sieve I'm using. There are different shades of them in the market. So you need to sieve out the flour. As I'm doing it, I'm checking the measurement. Remember, I'm working with 500 grams, but you can do less. This is quite a big number or massive quantity of cake, so you might not start out with me. You can do the divisions. I'm going to give you the measurement like I said. My 2 portions are 500 grams. Is exactly what I'm also measuring with the flour. There are different brands of flour in the market. I think any good one can still give you the same. Some people say they prefer a certain flour for certain products. If you're a good baker, you should be able to work around it. There is no hard and fast rule. Remember when we were doing the liquid content, we did liquid to liquid. Now we are doing the dry content, it's dry to dry. So we are putting baking powder. Because it's dry, we are incorporating it into the flour. Baking powder. There's a difference between baking powder and baking soda. We are using baking powder in this case. Maybe next time we can talk about the difference and how they make your products come out. So if you're also using powdered vanilla, this is also the point to put it. But in this case, I had used the liquid, so there's no need for the powdered one. If you also feel you can just take a little touch of each of those, you can still do that. So we continue the mixing, and at this stage we are beginning to put the flour bit by bit. It's advisable to cut it into 3 parts and gradually turn it together. So be careful. Notice what I did. I turned down the speed of my mixer, and then I'll put just a little quantity of the flour at first. My spatula is my help and my guide now, because you can also try to put your flour in a container that has more controlling ability. This is wider, so it can make your contents pour away. But thanks to my spatula, it's helping me in this case. When you first put the flour, it's advisable to go on a low speed in order not to allow the flour splash, because it's powder. There is no cooperation yet between the flour and the liquid content, but as you incorporate them and make them become friends, they stay together. So you go at a low speed, say 1, 2, and even 3. So we do the second part, and we keep doing that until we have put all the flour. Remember, I said we are going to cut it into 3. You go and continue going until you work everything in. Watch the carefulness with which I'm doing this. If you forget yourself and lift your mixer up without turning it off or pausing it, it's going to splash all over you, and you wouldn't like that. So there is need to be careful while doing this. Now we put the last portion of the flour or the dry content. If there is any other dry thing you want to incorporate in your flour, it's also this time you do that. We continue. You are in control of the process, so it's good you clean as you work. It's good you take charge of the process. Just be yourself. It's just like cooking any other food. When you have mastery over what you're doing, you are in control. You keep stirring until everything is properly mixed together. At this point, you can now increase your speed to make everything blend in together. I might not bore you with other things you might do, because we are just learning how to make a basic cake that is very yummy and fluffy. At this point, keep doing until there is no lump or seed in your mixture. At this point, you might still need to work your content together. Watch how I'm trying to get everything off the hook so that I don't lose any of them or it doesn't pour away. So I stand the hook outside, and then I try to scrape everything together again. It's either you continue beating with the hook or you finish up with your hands. It's very important to check everything, whether they are all properly mixed together. And don't say because you are using the mixer, you will not check what you are doing with a spatula. Sometimes what you're doing gets stuck to the body of the containers. Sometimes it's not properly mixed down. You might need to check and be very sure you have achieved a very homogeneous mixture. Now we give it the very last touch of mixing. I want to also remind you that at this point our oven is on. You need to have heated your oven to some extent before you start baking, and then you know the process is going to take you, or how long it's going to take your oven to heat up. Then you get it started at that time. I'm doing this for the past 15 minutes, and I know that I will need that 15 minutes to keep heating my oven. It depends on the type of oven you are using. I'm using a gas oven and I need to get it hot to some extent, but some people are using electric oven that comes on and starts responding right away. It depends on you. Now at this point too, we have to put our liquid milk. You can use any brand of milk, but make sure it's not that cold. Even if it's in the fridge, you might need to get it out at a good time so it gets okay. Then for this quantity, I decided to use 150 ml of milk. My cake needs to be as healthy as it can be because children are going to eat the cake. Remember, you had put a liquid mixture. It's important you also get everything together. Now we are done with the mixing. We are done with our mixing. You see how easy it is, how very easy it is to make a fluffy baby cake. You need to be careful with the cables for your mixer. Sometimes it can cause problems for you if you are not careful. It's very important to be very aware of your environment when you are working. Now we need to remember your oven should have been heating by now. It depends on the type of oven you are using. If you need to take a longer time, start it while you are mixing. Now the first thing we do before we bake the cake is to grease the pan. Greasing means to lubricate the pan with an oil medium so that it doesn't stick while you are trying to bring the ready product out. In doing this, you can use vegetable oil. You can use any oil at all. And then with a brush, you put a little drop of oil, brush through all the edges of the pan to grease it. If you are using this kind of pan, make sure it's properly fixed. I'm using a spray oil. It's easier and faster, but if you don't have it, just to use your normal oil and brush to walk through the pans. If you don't have a brush, you can also use a piece of clean nylon together to do that. In this case, I want to cut the cake in small bits. I want to bring something very important to your notice at this point. It's advisable not to heap your cake. As in pour. When I started baking, I used to pour the whole of this quantity into one pan and it stay hours baking, and before it's ready, a good portion of the outside is very dark or almost burnt, if not burnt. That is not professional at all. To achieve a very nice look, I will advise for whatever size of cake you are making, is good to cut them in bits such that they cook faster and come out very nice. So for this cake, I decided to use a 6 inches pan. That's a topic for another time, the sizes of your cake. I decided to use a 6 inches pan and tot it, or put them in pieces so that it cooks faster and comes out very nice. But there is one thing you have to be very careful about. It is to measure the quantity that goes into each pan, because you're going to couple everything into one cake finally. So you make sure you maintain almost the same quantity. Don't be like me that is just pouring the cake into the pan. I'm doing this because I already know what to expect. I'm estimating and I can do that. If you're just starting, you might need to use a cup, a spoon, or whatever, and make sure you put the same quantity in each pan so that they come out the same height, the same size when you are done. Though there are times it might not exactly come out the same height, no problems. There's also a way to take care of that. It shouldn't cause for alarm since they are all going into the same body of cake. But what should give you worry is if they shrink to the point that they are not the same width. Remember I said your oven should have been heating. Oh my God, my oven is hot right now. So I'm checking the temperature. If you are using a standard oven, you can use temperature gauge, but I'm doing like my grandma. I use my hand to check the temperatures. Now I can bake these 3 small sizes in the same layer of the oven. You might not be able to do the same with me depending on the type of oven you're using, the size of the pan. It's advisable also not to load the cake in the oven in such a way that the heat will not be uniformly circulating, and then your cake will not bake uniformly. If it takes baking them differently to get the best results, that's better. But if you are sure of your oven, you can still do like me. Remember, some of the things I'm doing them because I know that I can manage the process. If you can't, like me, don't do exactly what I did here now. Put them each one after the other. In this case, I decided to continue by making a small cupcakes from my remaining batter. You can still do that. Get your cupcakes paper, put them in the cookie pan and bake. But this is not what we're doing now. It's just a side attraction. Now my batter is still remaining for the main cake that I wanted to bake, so I decided to make out a little from the remaining batter, so I show you exactly how it came out. And this is why I put it in this pan that is not exactly the same with the one I had used earlier. Remember, your scraper is your friend. One thing why I like this, my scraper is very flexible. It takes a lot of pressure. It gets me what I want. It can make me or help me clean up this bowl and get all the content into the pan without worrying. I know somebody might be worried about what's happening to the first cake we had put in the oven. As an advice, do not check your cake anything less than 10-15 minutes after you had put it in the oven. It also depends on the size. For very large cakes, you might get up to 30 minutes. But for small cakes like the one that I just put now, you can do that within 10-15 minutes to check how they are responding to the heat, how it's responding to the positioning, especially when you put several pans together. The heat response to heat is not going to be the same. You will need to check it. The next thing you do while you're waiting for the cake is clean up everything you had used. Cake work can be very messy, and if you are not careful, everywhere is busy without your knowing, and it can be cumbersome. Once you are done, you start cleaning up. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that I am making this video at night. It's late in the night and the video quality might be affected, but that's okay. I hope you see what we are doing properly. Now it's time to check what we have here. Woo! This looks very beautiful. Have you seen the cakes we are spaced out in the oven, and that's why they can cook very well without having issues. Now I noticed that the one inside is a little bit wide, so I changed the position and turn it so that it can get good like the others. Now, how do you know that your cake is cooked? When you tap on the surface, you have this bolus feeling like a bouncing ball. The sound is also there, like boom, boom, boom. And it's a little bit stiff. You know that it's cooked. But if it's not cooked, you will notice that it's still wet and watery in the middle. You see, it's firm enough. You know your cake is cooked. For smaller cakes like this, I will not advise that you allow them stay so long in the oven such that it dries up. When your cake stays too long in the oven, it dries up and it's like the person is eating biscuits and not cake. So I bring those ones down. And the last one that looks a little white, there are two things you can do. When you're checking your cake, you put a skewer in the middle. If you don't have a skewer, you can use this barbecue stick that I'm using. Any clean stick can help you. If it's not cooked, you will see it's wet and stained. You notice that. Now it's cooked but not really caked, so I just leave it for like 2 minutes. There are two things you can do. If you want it cooked in the fire, you just leave it like few minutes and it dries up there, or you bring it down the oven. There is what we call residual heat. The residual heat is the heat the substance is carrying from the fire. It's still able to cook that last moment of not really cooked. I'm not talking about wet, visibly uncooked cake. At this stage where you want your cake to be moist enough, you don't want it dry in the oven, you can bring it down. Now see what we have. After bringing the cake down, you wait for a few minutes. It gives way from the pan. Then you bring a rack. Sometimes you have the rack in the oven, and if you don't have, you can still buy any form of rack, wooden, metal, and what have you in the market, but just have one as a baker. See what it's going to do for you. When you bring out the cake from the oven, allow it some minutes to give way from the pan, as in to detach from the pan. Then you turn it onto the rack. Why we use the rack is to allow the cake have enough air all over it as to cool off. Now see what happened. My cake got broken because it still wet down a bit, and then because I didn't really give it the time to come out, or because I didn't properly grease that portion of the pan. These are three possibilities, so watch out for it. And even if it happens, don't cry. There are times it happens and it's bigger than this. You don't need to cry too much. Just get a very nice scraper and lift carefully that portion of the cake that got broken and transfer it back to the body of the main cake in the shape it should have. Should be able to solve your problem. In this case, it's really small that you can ignore it. But if it happens to a very large cake, so much that it can affect the shape of the cake, you can do what I just said now. You see how fluffy our cake is. It's bouncing. It's very fluffy. How do you know it's fluffy? When you touch it, you discover that bolus tendency, the ability to bounce off. Then that's, you know, you did a nice job. But if you touch it and it's not giving you that bouncing feeling, I feel there is much to worry about. You might need to start thinking what you didn't do well. Now there is something I want you to notice. When you leave the cake on the rack, for some moment, it makes a line on the cake. It makes a line on the cake. Then if you want to alter the shape of that line, you change the direction too. All this within the time the cake is hot. I like doing this, especially when I am not going to cover the cake. Maybe I want to wrap them in small pieces like this for sale, or to dash someone, or just for some other reason that will not require covering. So it gives me a very nice shape and design on top of the cake. As you can see, I'm happy, I'm smiling because we did it. I got what I wanted. Now when you have cooled off the cake for some moments, this is a small cake and I'm doing everything right away within short time because I don't want the cake drying out. If it's larger cake, it can stay a little bit longer than this one. Now there's something you need to do that's important. Wrapping up the cake in cling films if you are not using it right away. This cake is ready to eat, but if you don't want to eat it right away, you can do this. You use a clean film or foil paper or even plastic, anything that will retain moisture, to wrap up the cakes until you are ready to either eat them or cover them for decorations or put them in the fridge for refrigeration. Make sure you wrap them up and make them airtight. Did you notice that shape I talked about that is made by the rack? This is what I mean. It comes out very beautiful when you don't want to cover the cake with icings and you want to give it out to someone or you want to display it somewhere. You can still go ahead and put some cherries on it and use a transparent plastic to close it up and make whatever you want to make out of it. So now you remember the last cake that I put in a separate pan that I said I wanted to show you something with. It's ready now and we want to check it out and see what we made. Still go ahead and turn it onto the rack. Now take note of how I turned that cake. I put my hand directly on it to help it. You don't just go ahead turning everything. It can scatter your cake, make it fall out, or even break off the pan, especially when they are big. Try and guard it with your hands as you turn to put on the rack. Because I made that mistake to cut the other cake, I decided that this one I'm going to allow it to give way off the pan before I lift the pan. Ooh, see what we have here. Very nice flat hot cake. And notice what I'm doing too, because if I want to lift that cake up, I can break it. So I go put the board and flip it. Take note of all this because these are some of the mistakes we make that give us the wrong results. Wow, you see how that cake is? Remember, if your cake is not malleable enough, if it's not bouncing, if it's not flexible, it means you didn't bake it the right way. This is fluffy, this is nice, the color is golden and not burnt. You can go as far as baking it in bits like this. It comes out in faster times, and then you go ahead and tot the cakes when you want to cover them. Totting means to join. You see how fluffy and bouncing this cake is. Oh my God, I can just eat up everything now. Let's have a taste. This is beautiful. You see? Wow, this is beautiful. You can eat your cake like this. You can also go ahead for decoration, but for this cake, we have come to the end. If you have any question, do well to put it in the comment section. I can tell you anything you need to know about making a basic cake. If you want us to do more of this, please let me know. And don't just watch and pass by. Please give me a like, press the like button, share this video to as many people as you think it will be useful to, and then subscribe to my channel so that when next I bring this kind of content, you will be notified. And please put on your notification button. Now see what we have at the end of the day. After coupling all the cake together, this is what I have. It's for a baby girl. We played with colors and then we made something out of those small pieces we were ranting about. I like the marshmallow splashes. I like the height of the cake. But don't worry, if you still want us to get to this stage where you know how we did it, just keep watching, subscribe, and let me know your preferences. And we have come to the end of today's lesson. Isn't this a master class? See you next time. Thank you.